Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalists podcast, episode 84. I'm Mark Moncrief from Upon Hope, and today the theme is transhumanism. So, what's transhumanism? Well, I'm going to start by reading you an article. This is from The Guardian in 2018. It's called No Death and an Enhanced Life. Is the Future Transhuman? The aims of the transhumanist movement are summed up by Mark O'Connell in his book To Be a Machine, which last week won the Wellcome Book Prize. It is their belief that we can and should eradicate aging as a cause of death, that we can and should use technology to augment our bodies and our minds, that we can and should merge with machines, remaking ourselves finally in the image of our own higher ideals. The idea of technologically enhancing our bodies is not new, but the extent to which transhumanists take the concept is. In the past, we made devices such as wooden legs, hearing aids, spectacles, and false teeth. In the future, we might use implants to augment our senses so we can detect infrared or ultraviolet radiation directly, or boost our cognitive processes by connecting ourselves to memory chips, ultimately by merging man and machine. Science will produce humans who have vastly increased intelligence, strength, and lifespan, and their embodiment of gods. Is that a desirable goal? Advocates of transhumanism believe there are spectacular rewards to be reaped from going beyond the natural barriers and limitations that constitute an ordinary human being, but to do so would raise a host of ethical problems and dilemmas. As O'Connell's book indicates, the ambitions of transhumanism are now rising up our intellectual agenda, but this is a debate that is only just beginning. There is no doubt that human enhancement is becoming more and more sophisticated, as will be demonstrated at the exhibit of The Future Starts Here, which opens at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London this week. Items on display will include powered clothing made by the US company Seismic, worn under regular clothes. These suits mimic the biomechanics of the human body and give users, typically older people, discrete strength when getting out of a chair or climbing stairs or standing for long periods. In many cases, these technological or medical advances are made to help the injured, sick, or elderly, but are then adapted by the healthy or young to boost their lifestyle or performance. The drug EPO increases red blood cell production in patients with severe anemia, but has also been taken up as an illicit performance booster by some athletes to improve their bloodstream's ability to carry oxygen to their muscles. And that's just the start, say experts. We're now approaching the time where for some kinds of track sports, such as the 100-metre sprint, athletes who run on carbon fibre blades will be able to outperform those who run on natural legs, say Blair Whitby, an artificial intelligence expert at Sussex University. The question is, when the technology reaches this level, will it be ethical to allow surgeons to replace one's limbs with carbon fibre blades just so they can win gold medals? Whitby is sure many athletes will seek such surgery. However, if such an operation became before any ethics committee that I was involved in, I would have none of it. It is a repulsive idea to remove a healthy limb for transient gain. Not everyone in the field agrees with this view, however. Cybernetics expert Kevin Warwick of Coventry University sees no problem in approving the removal of natural limbs and their replacement with artificial blades. What is wrong with replacing imperfect bits of your body with artificial parts that will allow you to perform better, or which might allow you to live longer, he says. Now, that's about half the article, but it really gives you a really good idea of what transhumanism is about. And again, as I just said by mistake, there's transgenderism, and that's connected to transhumanism, because it's all about this liberal idea that you are self-made, that you can make yourself into anything that you want. So if we continue to live under a liberal system, then transhumanism is the future. And I'm going to be reading a number of articles today that all have the theme of transhumanism, of destroying our biological reality and creating something that is not real, simply so that we can get a transient gain. And we can see this with the transgender idea. These people are suffering from some kind of mental illness, and instead it's held up as some great ideal that they're actually better than other people because they're self-made. Well, according to liberalism, that's exactly how it is. They are better people. Now here's another article. This one's from Forbes, and it's entitled Transhumanism and the Future of Humanity. 7 Ways the World Will Change by 2030. So that's 9 years away. Now, I'm not going to read the article. I'm just going to read the 7 ways. 1, our bodies will be augmented, which means we'll have parts of ourselves that will be artificial and, by definition, better. 2, our thought processes will be faster and more transferable, because we'll actually have implants that will affect our mind. 3, gamification and behavioural science will increase human productivity. So again, this is supposed to make us better superhumans. 4, we'll be more empathetic. I don't believe that one for a moment. 5, we will see the emergence of extreme personalisation and customisation. So in other words, every single person will be different because you won't have the same implants that I have, and so forth. Everyone will be highly personalised. 6, business practices will shift significantly. Well, if this is true, they're probably right. 7, conversations focused on our societal values will gain a great deal of attention. Well, that probably doesn't really need transhumanism, does it? But again, we're talking about this artificial person, and that artificial person is more important than natural people. And that's pretty disturbing, because our law, our ethics, our morality is all based on the idea of the natural person. And if the natural person is artificial, then yeah, we're really in the shit. All right, let's continue with the article that actually started this. I bookmarked this a month ago. Australia to vote on 3-person baby IVF. Australia is set to have the first conscience vote since the same-sex marriage debate on allowing 3-person baby IVF to enable healthy babies to be born to women carrying deadly mitochondrial disease. The reforms, which have already been approved in the UK, allow what was described as the world's most comprehensive global scientific and ethical review of the treatment over a 10-year period. At least 60 Australian babies born each year suffer with severe and life-threatening forms of mitochondrial disease that could be prevented by using the mother's and father's nuclear DNA and replacing the mother's defective mitochondrial DNA with healthy mitochondrial DNA from a donor egg. Britain has approved the cautious use of the scientific breakthrough in specific circumstances where inheritance of the disease is likely to cause death or serious disease. There's no suggestion that it would be allowed at this stage for IVF in Australia involving more than one biological mother, for example, in lesbian or gay couples. Mitochondrial donations have been allowed in the United Kingdom since 2015, allowing affected couples to seek IVF treatment to conceive. The first babies were born through the process in 2017. Mito Foundation CEO Sean Murray told news.com.au the scientific breakthrough would save lives. This is a very welcome next step towards preventing mitochondrial disease in the next generation of Australian kids, he said. Every step and every vote for legalising mitochondrial donation is a step in the right direction. Mito, a debilitating and potentially fatal genetic disorder that robs the body's cells of the energy they need to function properly, affects one Australian child born each week. Legalising mitochondrial donation in Australia will allow parents to reduce the risk of their children developing mitochondrial disease and of this terrible disease from being passed on through future generations. We thank the governments for its support and for working closely with families and the Mito Foundation over the last few years. The Mito Foundation runs the 35-kilometre bloody long walk in Australia to raise awareness about the issue. While the Prime Minister has not yet declared his view on a conscience vote, he is expected to support the change as he is an ambassador for the Mito Foundation. The reforms are also supported by outgoing Labor health spokesman Chris Bowen, who has worked on the reforms with the Morrison government. Conscience votes are rare in Australia. In the last 50 years, they have included the abolition of the death penalty, 1973, the introduction of no-fault divorce, 1974, the Sex Discrimination Act, 1984, euthanasia laws applying to the Northern Territory, 1996, the Republic referendum, 1999, prohibition of human cloning and stem cell research, 2002 and 2006, introduction of abortion drug RU486 in 2005, and same-sex marriage in 2017. All right, so of all those, there's only two that actually went our way. In 1996, the euthanasia laws in the Northern Territory were struck down, and there was a prohibition on human cloning and stem cell research. Well, actually, I think the stem cell research happened, but the prohibition on human cloning. Everything else has passed, so this is going to pass. So the next article is Scott Morrison backs 3-person IVF and announces conscience vote. So that was the day after this first article. Sorry, 2 days after. So this is a done deal. This is going to happen. So we're going to have 3-person IVF. And they say, it's not going to be for lesbians and gays. Oh, no. Just like when IVF was originally introduced. When IVF was first introduced, they said, this is for couples who can't conceive. For husbands and wives, you have to be married to access IVF. And what happened? Well, what always happens in liberalism? The slippery slope. Because liberalism is the slippery slope. It's always the case of, hey, we introduce this little thing, and then we move it a little bit further, and we move it a little bit further, and we move it a little bit further. And why is this being talked about? It's because of this terrible disease. It is a terrible disease. There's no question about it. All right? So every week an Australian child is born with this terrible disease, which will eventually kill them because it basically destroys their body and they can't live. But at the same time, they are introducing this idea that natural birth is wrong. And there are people, so maybe listening now, who are saying, oh, no, that's not what they're saying. They're saying that there's this terrible disease and they need to eradicate this disease. But the problem is that what they are doing is they're opening Pandora's box. That's the slippery slope, right? They open with something that seems quite reasonable, and then they continue to proceed as if the most radical idea was actually the one that everyone agreed on in the first place. And, it's there's no happy ending to this. It's just going to get worse and worse. So, in that vein, here's my next article. In Breakthrough, Israelis grow hundreds of mouse embryos in artificial wombs. Israeli scientists have grown 250 cell embryos into mouse fetuses with fully formed organs using artificial wombs, in a development they say could pave the way for gestating humans outside the womb. We have grown hundreds of mice in this way, in a method that has taken 7 years to develop, and I'm still captivated every time I see it, stem cell biologist Professor Jacob Hanna of the Weizmann Institute of Science told the Times of Israel. This could be relevant to other mammals, including humans, though we acknowledge that there are ethical issues related to growing humans outside the body, he said. Hanna said that his research will advance understanding of organ formation in mammals and could facilitate medical advances, as it allows unprecedented views of the process unfolding, unconstrained by the need to image the inside of the uterus. His breakthrough was revealed on Wednesday in the peer-reviewed journal Nature, or should that be Unnatural. While scientists have been trying for decades to grow mammals outside the body, success has been limited to either very early stage embryos that are grown in a lab for a short period, or fetuses that were removed from the womb once their limbs are formed and then grown in a lab. When the Children's Hospital Philadelphia created an artificial womb in 2017 that successfully grew fetal lambs for over 4 weeks, the lambs already had their organs at the start of the experiment. But Hanna started with embryos consisting just of stem cells and watched with amazement as the organs of the mice, animals that have a speedy gestation of just 19 days, grew in front of his eyes. We took mouse embryos from the mother at day 5 of development, when they are just of 250 cells, and had them in the incubator from day 5 until day 11, by which point they had grown all their organs. By day 11, they make their own blood and have a beating heart, a fully developed brain. Anyone would look at them and say, this is clearly a mouse fetus with all the characteristics of a mouse. It's gone from being a ball of cells to being an advanced fetus. The fetus were healthy but died at 11 days, as this is currently the longest they can develop in the artificial womb, and they can't be transplanted back into a mice uterus. But Hanna hopes to develop his technology to take mice to full term. His method involves placing the embryos in a special liquid to nourish embryo cells in a laboratory dish and getting them to float on the liquid. With this step, they succeed in duplicating the first stage of embryonic development, in which the embryo grows tenfold. So here we are with people developing artificial wombs. So where does that leave human beings? Well, it leaves us where the same problem I have with artificial intelligence is we're supposed to be in charge. All of these things are supposed to be done to benefit us. But we're reaching a point where we are superfluous, where we can have a Cylon civilization where the robots take over and we're no longer needed. Now, that's pretty early days now, but this is when it should be stopped. This is when people should be saying, no, this is Frankenstein stuff. And Dr. Frankenstein, he was the monster, because he's the one who actually went out of his way to play God. And that's what these people are doing. They're playing God, and they're seeking at every stage to replace us. And they're too stupid to work it out. They all believe that they're doing good work, that they're advancing knowledge. You know, the very first story in the Bible is about the tree of knowledge, and about how that's the thing that created all the misery in the world. That instead of being satisfied with living a good life, we decided, hey, let's keep finding out more stuff, until eventually we found out stuff that we couldn't deal with, that we shouldn't have known. There's a reason why that's one of the first stories in the Bible, because it's actually common sense. You know, there are things that you shouldn't know. And I think that's where we are now. And people will say, oh, you're a Luddite. You know, the Luddites were right. You know, they were being destroyed. The they were tradesmen, craftsmen, and their jobs were being taken by machines. And there was no unemployment benefits. There was no safety net. Basically, either they worked or they starved, and their wives starved, and their children starved. So instead of that, they smashed the machines. And quite frankly, I think the Luddites were geniuses, and the people who opposed them were the evil bastards. And these are the evil bastards. Let me read the last article that I have. A 3-parent birth certificate. It's becoming more normal. This was written in 2016. Changes to family structure increasingly prompt changes to family paperwork, including in some communities where a birth certificate lists 3 parents instead of the customary 2. Customary. Thursday, New Jersey attorney Tabitha Y. Clark issued a press release announcing she's going to take on New Jersey's Attorney General, who is asking a court there to vacate an order that gives 3 adults equal legal parental rights. She's also seeking, on behalf of her clients, a birth certificate that includes the names of all 3 parents. That's not common, but neither is it without precedent. Internationally, families are choosing their own structure, and increasingly they ask for the paperwork to back it up. For instance, Argentina in May became the first Latin American country to recognize same-sex partners and a biological parent on a child's birth certificate, according to The Advocate. In 2013, ABC News, that's the American one, reported that a Miami judge had allowed a same-sex female couple and the male friend who provided the sperm, so one of the women could become pregnant, to all be listed on the child's birth certificate, for a total of 3 parents. When he became concerned that they were leaving him out, he sought legal protection of his parental rights. The 3 were able to work things out. ABC reported that, according to Florida law, sperm donors do not have any parental rights. However, a spokesman stressed that this case was not affected by this law and does not affect the current Florida law because there is an agreement between the 2 parties. Often the case involves a same-sex couple and an opposite-sex friend who agrees to help facilitate a pregnancy by providing either sperm or egg. 2 years ago, a lesbian couple and their male friend became British Columbia's first 3-parent group to take advantage of a new law that allows that on birth certificates, according to the Huffington Post. Before the baby was conceived, the 3 drafted a contract outlining how they wanted their family to work. The British Columbian law, called the Family Law Act, said the contracts have to be in place before the child is conceived. The parents agreed that 2 women would be financially responsible for the baby and would have custody, but the male would be a legal guardian with rights to access, the article said. The case Clark is litigating is a little different, according to the release. The case, EQ versus EC and DL, began in 2012 as a civil union dissolution action in Warren County when EQ sought to divorce her wife, EC. 1 child was born of the marriage to EC and was thought to have been conceived by artificial insemination. EQ, the non-biological mother, later formally adopted the child. Biological father, DL, pleaded into the pending divorce as a third-party plaintiff and proved that the child was conceived in an extramarital affair with EC. In March 2013, the parties entered a consent order whereby they would each be the child's legal parent with equal rights and be afforded reasonable parenting time. We wanted to decide for ourselves what our family looks like and how it is defined, said EQ in a written statement. Ours is a story like many others across the nation whose family does not fit in the state's predetermined boxes. She suggested the decision will impact many LGBT families. We wanted to decide for ourselves what our family looks like and how it is defined. Well, your family is a basket case, and that's how it's defined. And the rest of us all have to bow down and accept that these monstrous decisions, that these constantly bad decision after bad decision, are things that we have to acknowledge, that we have to support, and that the law has to acknowledge. You know, if you thought life was confusing up to now, when people can be, chopping off limbs and putting on artificial ones, when people can have their brains augmented by implants, when children can have 3 parents, why not 4 or 5 or 12 or 63? It's going to happen. And we're going to have children who are the property of the state, who belong to the government. Well, how's this going to have any happy ending? There are no happy endings here. It's all incredibly, incredibly bad, and entirely consistent with liberalism's basic philosophy, which is that we should be able to create our own reality. We should be able to create who we are. And that's why I oppose liberalism. And I hope you do too. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I will hopefully see you again next week. Bye-bye.